अक्सर नहीं होते,
ये
इनकी अटेंडेंस कैसे होती है?
ये खुद ही करते हैं।
चैट में आ जाओ, ये तब
अच्छा, कर दो शुरू। Assalamu alaikum. In the last 5 minutes, I am going to unmute you so you can ask questions. ये आगे पीछे नहीं जा रहा. Thank you. So I'm continuing with the liver and biliary tract. In the last lecture, we also covered like autoimmune hepatitis. Today, I'm going to do Wilson's disease. So Wilson disease is an autosomal recessive disorder which is caused by mutations of ATP7B gene, which is ATPase copper transporting beta polypeptide. It results in impaired copper excretion into the bile and failure to incorporate copper into ceruloplasmin. So Wilson's disease is a metabolic disorder in which there is going to be a defect in the gene ATP7B, which leads to impaired copper excretion into bile and failure to incorporate copper into ceruloplasmin. Toxic levels of copper, they accumulate into many organs and tissues like liver, brain, and eye. So mostly those organs are involved like liver, brain, and eye. And in some cases, other organs can be involved as well. So the normal transport of the copper is 40 to 60% of copper is absorbed in the duodenum and small intestine. That is 2 to 5 grams per day, which is transported to portal circulation complex with albumin and histidine. So 40 to 60% of copper, which is 2 to 5 grams per day, is going to be absorbed by duodenum and small intestine, and it goes into the circulation, which is complex with albumin and histidine. Free copper dissociates, which is taken up by hepatocytes and bind to alpha-2 globulin, apoceruloplasmin, which is secreted into the blood. So the normally what happens is, whatever the copper is going to be absorbed, that is 2 to 5 grams per day, it is going to taken up by hepatocytes, and hepatocyte bind it to alpha-2 globulin, apoceruloplasmin, which is secreted into the blood. Excess copper is transported into the bile. Ceruloplasmin accounts for 90 to 95% of plasma copper, which is decylated, endocytosed by the liver and degraded within the lysosomes, after which the released copper is excreted into the bile. So what happens is the bile, which is, the copper which is absorbed is going to be taken up by ceruloplasmin by the hepatocytes, and ceruloplasmin accounts for 90 to 95% of plasma copper. It is decylated, endocytosed by the liver and degraded within the lysosomes, after which it is released. Copper is excreted into the bile. The degradation excretion pathway is the primary route for copper elimination. This is the primary route by which copper is eliminated from the body. Total body copper is 50 to 150 milligrams. So if you see this diagram, the copper which is going to be absorbed by intestinal absorption, it is going to be plasma albumin binding, which is rapidly cleared by the liver as ceruloplasmin. And the rest of it is going to be excreted by the kidney in the urine, and it is going to be taken up by other tissues like brain, eye, and enzymes. Aceruloplasminemia occur when there is defect in the chromosome 3, and Wilson's disease occur when there is ATPase gene defect, which is present in chromosome 13. So normally there is going to be biliary excretion, and rest is going to be excreted by the kidney, and none of this is going to be deposited into the tissues like brain, eye, enzyme. But when there are defects, like on chromosome 13, which is of ATPase gene, or on chromosome 3 or X chromosome, then the tissue deposition of ceruloplasmin will result, or copper will result. Pathogenesis. Wilson's disease results from when there is mutation in ATP7B gene, which is located in chromosome 13. ATP7B gene encodes a transmembrane copper transporting ATPase, which is expressed on hepatocyte canalicular membrane. So in case of Wilson's disease, it results from defects in ATP7B gene, which is located on chromosome 13. ATP7B gene encodes a transmembrane copper transporting ATPase expressed on the hepatocyte canalicular membrane. More than 300 mutations of ATP7B genes are seen, but all of these do not cause the disease. Deficiency in ATP7B protein causes a decrease in copper transport in the bile, impairs its incorporation into cellular plasmin, and inhibits cellular plasmin secretion into the blood. So the basic defect is in the transport in the bile when the ATP7B gene protein is defective. So bile impairs its incorporation into cellular plasmin and inhibits cellular plasmin secretion into the blood. So when there is going to be defect in the cellular plasmin, Wilson's disease results. Wilson's disease will lead to hepatomegaly, which is increase in the size of the liver with jaundice, acute hepatitis, permanent hepatic failure, portal hypertension, which can produce bleeding varices, which I have already discussed with you, leading to cirrhosis. In the kidney, proximal renal tubular dysfunction will result. In the heart, this can deposit and lead to cardiac arrhythmias. In the bone, arthritis and rickets can develop. In the eye, there is development of Kayser-Fleischer ring because of the deposition of copper in the Descemet's membrane. In the hemolysis, hematopoietic system hemolysis can occur. In the central nervous system, it is going to lead to deterioration in performance, behavioral changes, in coordination in handwriting, resting and intentional tremors, dystonia, dysarthria, excessive salivation, mask-like facies, and dysphagia. These are the changes which can be seen in cases of Wilson's disease. So as I told you, pathogenesis, there is defect in ATPase7, which is expressed on the hepatocyte canalicular membrane. There is deficiency in ATP7B protein, which causes a decrease in copper transport into the bile and impairs incorporation into cellular plasmin and inhibits cellular plasmin secretion into the blood. These changes lead to copper accumulation in the liver and decreases its circulation as cellular plasmin. Accumulated copper causes injury by three mechanisms. Number one mechanism is promoting the formation of free radicals by Fenton reaction. Fenton reaction is in which hydrogen peroxide is going to react with iron and it's going to lead to formation of hydroxyl ion, OH negative ion. These ions are going to cause injury to the hepatocytes. Number two, the injury is because of binding to sulfhydryl group of cellular proteins. And number three mechanism is displacing other metals from hepatic metalloenzymes. So in the liver, the pathogenesis is like that accumulated copper, it leads to formation of free radicals, hydroxyl ion by Fenton reaction. Number two, binding to self-hydro group of cellular proteins. And number three, by displacing other metals from metalloenzymes. This process is slow in onset, but there can be a sudden onset of systemic illness as well, which is triggered by spillage of non-cellular plasmin bound copper from the liver into the blood. So two mechanisms are taking place in the acute case. Number one is the same as I've explained you earlier, and number two is which is triggered by spillage of non-cellular plasmin bound copper from the liver into the blood. This causes hemolysis and pathological changes are seen in the brain, in the cornea, kidney, bones, joints, and parathyroid gland. So these are the organs which are mostly involved: brain, cornea, kidney, bones, joints, and parathyroid gland. In the liver, the morphology is hepatic changes vary from mild to massive damage. Fatty change can be mild to moderate with focal hepatocyte necrosis. Okay. So first we are going to do the changes in the liver. In the liver, you can see it can be vary from mild to massive damage. So in cases of fatty change, it can be mild to moderate with focal hepatocyte necrosis. And acute fulminant hepatitis can occur as well because of the copper accumulation. Chronic hepatitis can develop as well in Wilson disease, which exhibit moderate to severe inflammation and hepatocyte necrosis. Fatty chain, steatohepatitis, hepatocyte ballooning with Mallory-Dank bodies, eventually cirrhosis is seen. So what happens is, in the case of Wilson's disease, hepatic changes, they can vary from mild to massive, and mild changes, fatty change can be seen with moderate hepatocyte focal necrosis. An acute fulminant hepatitis can also develop, or a chronic hepatitis can develop. In chronic hepatitis in Wilson's disease, it exhibits moderate to severe inflammation and hepatocyte necrosis. There is going to be fatty chain, steatohepatitis, hepatocyte ballooning with Mallory-Dank bodies, and eventually cirrhosis is seen. So all these terminology you are familiar, I've explained you earlier in the previous lectures as well. Moderate to severe inflammation, you know, can be in the portal tract or as well as in the lobules. Hepatocyte undergo necrosis. Necrosis of the hepatocyte can be seen. Fatty changes, accumulation of fat in the hepatocyte. Steatohepatitis, I have already explained to you, inflammation of the hepatocyte surrounded by inflammatory infiltrate, which is mostly lymphoplasmacytic. Hepatocyte ballooning with Mallory-Dank bodies. Hepatocyte balloon out, and pinkish eosinophilic dead bodies are found within the hepatocyte, which are formed of 8 to 18 micron meter skeins, which are present within the hepatocyte, which stain pink with the H&E stain. And eventually, because of this steatohepatitis, cirrhosis develops. That is because of laying down of fibers by stellate cells, which are present within the space of Descemet. So these are the changes you can see in the liver. The special stains for copper are rhodamine stain or Ornstein stain. Rhodamine or Ornstein stain. Rhodamine stain for copper and Ornstein stain for copper associated protein. They show excess copper deposition within the hepatocytes. Hepatic copper content in excess of 250 grams per gram dry weight is diagnostic for Wilson's disease. So in this case, as I've told you, in the case of hemochromatosis and hemosiderosis, we can do the genetic analysis. In the hepatic copper accumulation is a more diagnostic test as compared to seeing the mutation of ATP7B gene. So hepatic content, copper content, which is in excess of 250 grams per gram dry weight, is diagnostic for Wilson's disease. The changes in the brain, which can be seen, are toxic injury to the brain, which affects basal ganglia, putamen, which shows atrophy and cavitation. So because of accumulation of the copper in the brain, toxic changes in the brain can be seen, which are mostly seen in the basal ganglia and putamen, which show atrophy and cavitation. So if you see this photomicrograph, you can see the hepatocyte, and in between the cytoplasm of the hepatocyte, you can see these red granules. These are all copper stained by rhodamine stain. This is the rhodamine stain, which is contrastingly showing the copper accumulation as compared to the cytoplasm, which appears pink. The copper appears reddish in color, which is present within the cytoplasm. You can see these are the hepatocyte nuclei, and you can see within the cytoplasm, copper accumulation is seen. This is also intracytoplasmic copper. This is a brownish color, and it is not that red in color. This is the H&E stain. Okay. In the eye, the changes seen are Kayser-Fresher rings in the eye, which are green to brown deposition of copper in Descemet's membrane in the limbus of cornea. Around the eye, you can see greenish to brown deposition of copper, which is present in the Descemet membrane in the limbus of cornea. So if we go back and see, I've told you the Wilson's disease is because of excess accumulation of copper, and in the normal individual, copper is excreted into the bile and rest of it is going to be secreted by the kidney. But if there is accumulation of the copper, it's going to hamper the many organs in the body, and it is because of the deficiency of or ATPase, which is expressed in hepatocyte canalicular membrane. The protein is going to be defective, and this defect is going to lead to increased in excess deposition of copper in the liver, which can damage the liver or hepatocyte by promoting the generation of free radicals by hydroxyline bifenton reaction, or binding to self-hydryl group of cellular protein, or displacing the metals from hepatic metalloproteinases. And this is a slow onset disease. But sometimes sudden onset disease can be seen as well. In sudden onset disease, the above mechanism is present, but in combined with that, there is a trigger of spillage of non-cellular plasmin bound copper into the liver, and this can cause hemolysis and pathological changes in the liver, brain, cornea, kidney, bones, joints, and parathyroid gland. And I'll explain you the changes which can be present in the liver, which are the same as that you have seen in other, like in a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or fatty liver disease, but the difference is because in this case there is accumulation of copper, and this copper can be stained by rhodamine and Ornstein stain, which are the special stains for copper. This can also lead to injury in the brain, which is basically cavitation and atrophy in basal ganglia and putamen. And in the as I eye, there are going to be Kayser-Fleischer rings, as I've explained to you earlier. And these I've told you, the rhodomine is staining copper, which is reddish in color within the cytoplasm of the hepatocyte. Okay. The clinical features in the Wilson's disease. The clinical features are like this, that patient presents between age of 60 to 40 years, 6 to 40 years of age. They present as an acute or chronic liver disease, I've explained earlier. Neurological involvement as movement disorders or rigid dystonia or psychiatric symptoms can be seen. So neurological involvement are like movement disorders or rigid dystonia or psychiatric symptoms can be seen. Patient can also develop hemolytic anemia. Biochemical diagnosis. Decrease in the serum cellular plasmin, increase in the hepatic copper content, and increased copper excretion in the urine is seen. So biochemical diagnosis is by decrease in the serum cellular plasmin level, which is done on the serum, increase in the hepatocyte copper content in the dry weight, and increased copper excretion into the urine can be seen. So this is all about the Wilson's disease. Next is the alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. This is also a metabolic disorder which can lead to cirrhosis. So metabolic disorders which can lead to cirrhosis are three: hemochromatosis, Wilson's disease, and alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. Now we are doing alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. Alpha-1 antitrypsin is an autosomal recessive disorder of protein folding marked by very low levels of circulating alpha-1 antitrypsin. So alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency is an autosomal recessive disorder of protein misfolding, which is marked by very low levels of circulating alpha-1 antitrypsin in the serum. The major function of this protein is protease inhibition. Protease inhibition, especially which are proteases secreted by the neutrophils like elastase, cathepsin G, and proteinase 3, which are released by neutrophils at the site of inflammation. So the major function of alpha-1 antitrypsin is to inhibit the proteases which are secreted by neutrophils. These proteases are elastase, cathepsin G, and proteinase 3. These are secreted at the site of inflammation, and these are secreted in order to destroy the bacteria. But if alpha-1 antitrypsin is deficient, these proteases can also lead to destruction of the normal tissues of the body. You have already done alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency in our lung chapter when I told you it is a major role in the pathogenesis of emphysema. I hope you remember that. So alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency leads to pulmonary emphysema, as I've already mentioned when we did the lectures. Liver disease due to accumulation of misfolded protein, which we are going to do today. And cutaneous necrotizing paniculitis can also be seen because of alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. Alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency leads to all these changes in the different organs in the body, in the lung, leading to emphysema in the liver, and in the cutaneous necrotizing paniculitis. Alpha-1 antitrypsin is a small 394 amino acid plasma glycoprotein which is synthesized by the hepatocyte. So alpha-1 antitrypsin is an amino acid, 394 amino acid plasma glycoprotein which is synthesized by hepatocyte. It belongs to the family of serine protease inhibitor, serpin family. Gene is located in chromosome 14. 75 types have been identified as alpha-1 antitrypsin. P1 is used for protease inhibitor. So we use PI as a designation for protease inhibitor, as alpha-1 antitrypsin is a protease inhibitor. So we denote this with PI. So there are 75 types. PIMM is one type, PIS is another type, PI null means no antitrypsin, and PIZZ is another type. So PIMM is the most common type, which is also known as wild type. It is seen in 90% of individuals. PIS is a variant, also show moderate decrease in alpha-1 antitrypsin, and PI null means no detectable alpha-1 antitrypsin. PIZ is the most common clinically significant mutation. Homozygous loss of PIZZ protein have only 10% of circulating alpha-1 antitrypsin. These individuals develop clinical disease. So we have what is alpha-1 antitrypsin? It is an amino acid which is 394 plasma glycoprotein, which is synthesized by the hepatocyte, and it belongs to the serpin family, and the basic function is protease inhibitor. So we designate alpha-1 antitrypsin as PEI. There are 75 forms. One is PIMM, which is the most common wild type. It is present in 90% of individuals. Other is PIS, which is a variant which is show moderate decrease. And PI null means no alpha-1 antitrypsin in the serum. And PIZ, which is the most common clinically significant mutation. The homozygous loss of PIZZ protein have only 10% of circulating alpha-1 antitrypsin, and these individuals develop clinical disease. Those individuals will develop clinical disease of alpha-1 antitrypsin which have homozygous loss of PIZZ protein. Okay. These individuals develop clinical disease. PIMZ have intermediate levels of alpha-1 antitrypsin. I hope this is clear. So the major function of this protein is inhibition of proteases, especially neutrophil elastase, cathepsin G, and proteinase 3, which are normally released by neutrophils at the site of inflammation. All of you know in acute inflammation, the chemical mediators or the proteases which are secreted by neutrophils are elastase, cathepsin G, and proteinase 3, and they are inhibited by antitrypsin. So if antitrypsin is deficient, after inhibiting the bacterial, after doing the bacterial inhibition or bacterial killing, these elastase, cathepsin G, and proteinase 3 can damage the normal tissues of the body. So in order to prevent this damage, alpha-1 antitrypsin is going to play a role, and this is going to lead to decrease in the level of elastase, cathepsin G, and proteinase 3. And the pathogenesis. Protein is synthesized and migrate from endoplasmic reticulum to the Golgi apparatus. This alpha-1 antitrypsin, which is a protein, it is synthesized by the liver cells and it goes into the endoplasmic reticulum to go to the Golgi apparatus. In the deficiency forms, protein is abnormally folded and polymerized and remains in the endoplasmic reticulum. And by its misfolding and present in the endoplasmic reticulum, it produces stress on the endoplasmic reticulum, triggering the unfolding protein response that may lead to apoptosis of the hepatocyte. So what's happening is protein is going to be synthesized in the endoplasmic reticulum, but it is not going to go into the Golgi apparatus. It remains in the endoplasmic reticulum in the misfolded form, and it produces stress on this endoplasmic reticulum, which will lead to apoptosis of the hepatocyte, which contains these alpha-1 antitrypsin misfolded protein. So all individuals with PIZZ genotype accumulate alpha-1 antitrypsin Z in the endoplasmic reticulum of hepatocyte. Only 10 to 15% of them develop overt clinical disease. Other genetic and environmental factors are also responsible for the production of the disease. So what happening is all the individuals we have which are PIZZ genotype, which accumulate alpha-1 ATZ in the endoplasmic reticulum of hepatocyte, only 10 to 15% of them will develop the disease. Morphology of the liver in case of alpha-1 antitrypsin. Morphologically, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency in PIZZ is characterized by the presence of round to oval cytoplasmic globular inclusion in the hepatocyte. As I've told you, this has to be secreted out, but because of the misfolding of protein, alpha-1 antitrypsin is going to be present within the liver cells, which is going to be present in the form of round to oval cytoplasmic globular inclusion within the hepatocyte. Okay. So if there is going to be deficiency, insufficient alpha-1 antitrypsin, neutrophil elastases will also damage the alveoli, leading to emphysema. And misfolded alpha-1 antitrypsin also builds in the liver hepatocyte. This is one diagram. In the other diagram, I'm showing you the comparison between the normal level and abnormal level of alpha-1 antitrypsin. In the normal level, alpha-1 antitrypsin coats lungs, protecting them from neutrophilic elastase. Alpha-1 antitrypsin protects lungs from neutrophil elastase, okay, by coating them. Neutrophil elastase produced by white blood cells to break down by obviously neutrophils, break down harmful bacteria, potentially damaging to the lungs if the lungs are exposed. So these are neutrophils which are present. They are going to, neutrophil elastase is going to be secreted, which will act on the bacteria. But if this alpha-1 antitrypsin is not present, it can also damage the lung alveoli. So neutrophil elastase uninhibited causing lung damage, alpha-1 antitrypsin trapped in the liver causing liver damage, and lungs lack alpha-1 antitrypsin coating, leaving them open to damage by neutrophil elastase. So these are the harmful effects of deficiency of alpha-1 antitrypsin. So morphologically, I told you first, this is going to be present within the hepatocyte as round to oval cytoplasmic globular inclusions, which are pink in color. Alpha-1 antitrypsin PIZZ or PA stain are pinkish in color. Globules are also present in PIMZ and PISZ forms as well. PIZZ liver pathology can range from neonatal hepatitis without cholestasis and fibrosis to childhood cirrhosis or chronic hepatitis or cirrhosis that becomes apparent in life. So this disease manifests mostly in the childhood. So it can present as neonatal hepatitis in the newborns or neonates with or without cholestasis. Means cholestasis or bile stasis will be present or will not be present, and this can lead to fibrosis and can develop into childhood cirrhosis. Or this disease can present as chronic hepatitis or cirrhosis that become apparent later in life. Globular inclusions are sometimes not present in infants, only steatosis is present. Steatosis, all of you know, is fatty change in the liver. So if you see this picture, these globular eosinophilic bodies are present within the hepatocyte. This is a PS positive stain, which is doing pinkish eosinophilic cytoplasm as darker pink in color, these globular bodies. These are alpha-1 antitrypsin present within the hepatocytes. So you can also see these are alpha-1 trypsin present within the hepatocyte by H&E stain. These are also globular inclusion present within the hepatocyte, and you can see this fatty change or steatosis. Okay. So, as I've explained you, alpha-1 antitrypsin is an enzyme, is very important for the, because it is going to prevent the action of these proteases from the neutrophils. It is an anti-protease, so we designate as PI. And the most important form, which is PIZZ, it accumulates into the liver and it leads to presence of eosinophilic globular bodies into the liver, and because of its deficiency, the patient is going to develop emphysema or liver disease, which can lead to neonatal hepatitis with cirrhosis, or it can present in the later life as cirrhosis. So globular inclusions are sometimes only present in infants, or only steatosis is present. As I've already explained, these are the globular inclusions, and these are also globular inclusions, and these are also globular inclusion, and the rest of the hepatocyte show fatty change as well. The clinical features. Neonatal hepatitis with polystatic jaundice appear in 10 to 20% of newborns with this deficiency. In adolescent, presenting symptoms may be hepatitis, cirrhosis, or pulmonary disease. So in newborn individuals, neonatal hepatitis or neonatal cirrhosis can develop. In adolescent, symptoms may range from hepatitis to cirrhosis or pulmonary disease, which is emphysema. Attacks of hepatitis may subside with complete recovery or may become chronic and lead to cirrhosis. Sometimes disease is silent. Patient is not aware that he or she is suffering from the disease, and cirrhosis appears in the middle to late life. 2 to 3% of PIZZ individuals develop hepatocellular carcinoma as well. Okay, now we are going to see what is liver cirrhosis with each individual pathology. I have told you what is cirrhosis, but now I'm just going to sum up what is liver cirrhosis, because it is very important viva question as well. Cirrhosis of the liver is a condition which is marked by diffuse transformation of entire liver into regenerating parenchymal nodules surrounded by fibrous tissue bands and variable degree of vascular shunting. So what is a cirrhosis? It is a condition which is marked by diffuse transformation of liver parenchyma into regenerating parenchymal nodules, which are surrounded by thick fibrous tissue bands, the septas, which are with variable degree of vascular shunting. In the first lecture, I told you what is acute liver failure and chronic liver failure with cirrhosis, and I also explained you what is portal circulation and how this portal circulation becomes affected, leading to formation of collateral circulation, which is in the form of varices present around the esophagus, present around the rectum as well, and also around the umbilicus as caput medusae. So in the cirrhosis of the liver, portal hypertension is going to be seen and a person will develop cirrhosis. Causes of cirrhosis of the liver, you have already done cirrhosis of the liver with individual with a lesion. Chronic hepatitis B viral infection can lead to chronic hepatitis in cirrhosis. Chronic hepatitis C viral infection can lead to cirrhosis. Alcoholic liver disease lead to micronodular cirrhosis, which is also known as Lennox cirrhosis. Other causes are non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, hemochromatosis, Wilson's disease, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. So all of these we have discussed one by one. So all of these conditions can lead to chronic liver failure leading to cirrhosis, chronic viral hepatitis B viral infection, chronic viral C viral infection, alcoholic liver disease leading to cirrhosis, which is also known as Lennox cirrhosis, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, hemochromatosis, Wilson disease, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. All of these conditions can lead to cirrhosis. Cirrhosis can be micronodular or cirrhosis can be macronodular. Micronodular means small nodules appear on the surface of the liver, and macronodule means large nodules appear on the surface of the liver. Otherwise, the surface of the liver is smooth. So this is the cirrhosis of the liver. You can see small nodularity on the surface of the liver. This is also again micronodular cirrhosis. You can see small nodules on the surface of the liver. This is the cut section of the liver showing larger nodules. This is macronodular cirrhosis on the cut section of the liver. This is the normal liver lobule. I've already shown you this slide. Central vein, portal triad, and this is the liver lobule containing hepatocyte with biliary, with sinusoids and biliary canaliculi in between. Okay. So if you see this is a cirrhotic liver. In the cirrhotic liver, you can see such a big fibrous tissue band and dividing the liver parenchyma into different haphazard lobules. This is a not normal lobule. You cannot see a normal portal tract anywhere in this big band of fibrosis. So this is your examination slide which will appear in your OSPE. You have to give 2 points of identification. You can say a big fibrous tissue septa present with no portal tract identified and irregular liver lobule present. So these 2 points of identification you can give in your OSPE exam. So this is your OSPE slide. This is again liver cirrhosis stained by trichrome stain, and this is all Mason trichrome stains showing bluish fibrous tissue septa and haphazard liver lobules which are pink in color. But in the exam which are going to give you the standard H&D section, okay? We don't give you special stains. These are only meant for postgraduate children. We give you this slide which is very evident that it is a cirrhosis slide, okay? So, as cirrhosis, I've already told you, is a condition which is marked by diffuse transformation of entire liver into regenerative parenchymal nodules, which are surrounded by fibrous bands and vascular shunting is seen. So, I've already told you this Child-Pugh classification of cirrhosis, class A, class B, class C. Class A cirrhosis is a well-compensated cirrhosis in which patient do not have any signs of portal hypertension and patient has a normal activity. Partially decompensated is class B, in which there is going to be signs of portal hypertension. Class C is completely decompensated, in which you can see varices as well. Varices, I've already told you, they are present around the esophagus, they are present around the rectum, and they are also present around the umbilicus, which are called caput medusae. I have already shown you the slides as well. So grading of hepatitis I didn't cover in the last 2 lectures, which I should have, but this is mostly a postgraduate question. But sometimes my examiner can ask you, that's why I put these 2 slides here. So portal, okay. Portal periportal activity and lobular activity. In grade 0, it is none. In 1, portal inflammation, no necrosis, mild piecemeal necrosis, focal necrosis, moderate piecemeal necrosis, severe focal cell damage, severe piecemeal necrosis, and damage with bridging necrosis. This is again the same with grading and stage. You can read it on your own. And then we have circulatory disorder. I've already done you these circulatory disorders, so I'm not going into the details. And then there's chronic venous congestion. You have already done in your 4th year. I'm going to just show you the slide of nutmeg liver. That is, liver is showing brownish pigment with light darker areas because of chronic venous congestion. This is also chronic venous congestion. CVC slide of the liver. You can see the distended sinusoids with the RBCs, okay, around the central vein. So tomorrow we are going to discuss the classification of the tumors of the liver. आप unmute कर दें. Thank you. I'm going to unmute you and ask you questions. So if there are any questions, you can ask me now, or you can also message me individually or message me in LMS as well. Okay. Any questions, students? Any questions from today's lecture or any last lectures? Okay, I think you are not in a mood to ask I'm going to finish the lecture now and I will talk to you tomorrow, inshallah.